Hi everybody and welcome to Observing with Webb for April of 2016. We have some interesting stuff going on. April is going to bring us some shorter and shorter nights. We've got some of them will be warm, some of them will still be sub-freezing and still reminiscent of winter. But we have some interesting stuff going on, like Mercury is going to be visible in the sunset. You'll be able to see Jupiter, Mars, and Saturn hanging out. Aldebaran will get occulted by the moon, but during the daytime, so not as great, but pretty cool. And also the moon, Mars, Saturn, and Antares will have a pretty good encounter as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first talk about the planets that you can see throughout the month, and we'll go from there. So let's go by time. Let's do sunset first. Now, if you're looking around sunset, the brightest one that you're going to see is Jupiter, okay? And as you can see, I have it for April 15th at sunset. Let me go a little bit further as it gets darker. Jupiter is up there in the southeast, and it's the brightest thing out there. It's the first thing you're going to see in the night sky, except for the moon, and it's very, very bright. It's right below Leo here. And if you zoom in, if you have binoculars, you might be able to see something like this, where you see Jupiter and a couple moons next to it. If you have a telescope, you can even get much closer to see something closer to this. But either way, neat stuff with Jupiter. Now, what's going to happen to Jupiter throughout the night is, let me fast forward, it's going to rise up in the southeast. It's going to move more toward the south. It's going to get very high in the sky. Okay? And Jupiter will eventually set by around 4:30 in the morning. Okay, so you have to get out before 4:30 in the morning to actually see Jupiter. Now let me rewind a bit. Let me go back to sunset. And you should be able to see Mercury in the sunset. Now, in the beginning of the month, it's pretty close to the sun. All right, so what you got to do is wait a little bit as it gets further and further away from the sun, okay, and thus higher and higher in the sky. Notice I'm making the day, each day a day later. And right about the 15th or the 18th is when it reaches its maximum height in dusk. Almost said dawn. In dusk, right over here. And it's going to be tough to find because, as you can tell by the simulation, it doesn't really get totally dark when Mercury is up. So you'll need binoculars. You'll need a very good view of the western horizon. Clear, no trees in the way. Higher elevation, the better, probably. And yeah, so you can find Mercury. The thing is, though, is that after the 18th, it kind of goes back toward the sun, and by the end of the month, or even some people are saying the 22nd of April, Mercury is still a little too close to see. So you might be able to find it, but this is a good time to take a look. Just a side note, Venus is not visible at all for this month. Wait for next month. In the evening. So anyway, so there's Jupiter up there, and so let's just keep looking at the night sky as the night goes along. Oh, there you go, there's Mars. Mars is going to rise about 11, 12 o'clock, somewhere around there, in the southeast, and it's going to rise up, up, up. Oh, and Saturn's trailing not far behind. In fact, I believe technically it's about, let's see, that's 11:37, probably about half an hour. Okay, so they're pretty much traveling together. The cool part about Mars and Saturn is that they are in the constellation Scorpius. I find this when I go out on my morning runs, that the Scorpius is very, very neat to see. It's got this bright red star Antares right there. And then you've got Saturn and Mars and Antares making a triangle. And I'll skip ahead to it right now. The coolest part of this is that on the 25th of April, the moon's going to pop in and kind of make a quadrangle sort of thing with Saturn, Mars, and Antares down there, which is just really neat to see that many things close together in the sky. In fact, many of you have probably seen Mars lately being close to Grapheus in the sky. Some people have been mistaking Grapheus for Saturn, but Saturn's often to the left over here. So anyway, 25th, that's the time to look for that little neat thing happening. So anyway, yeah, that's it for the planets. So you've got sunset. You can see Mercury and Jupiter. Remember, sunset, you'll see Mercury off in the west, and Jupiter's going to be on the other side in the southeast, very, very bright. Throughout the night, you'll be able to see Jupiter as I fast forward time throughout the night. And then in the morning, you'll be able to see Saturn and Mars rising up together, and by sunrise, they're off in the south. All right. So, yeah, I hope you get out there to check out those planets. Get out the binoculars and telescopes. Now, let's move on to the events. And quite honestly, let's start at April 1st. Not much going on. There is a waning crescent moon in the morning, and it gets thinner and thinner and thinner and gets closer and closer to the sun until April 7th, where there is a new moon. It's right by the sun, and we have the darkest sky. So let's move over to sunset on the 7th with the new moon. But let's move ahead and see what happens with the moon. You'll notice that the moon is over here in the west, and it's a very thin crescent on April 8th. On the 9th, it's a little bit higher and a little bit thicker. And then on the 10th, it's a little bit higher and a little bit thicker, and this is where the occultation occurs. Okay? So what's going to happen, and times vary by location. Now, I have on the literature that D.C., in Washington, D.C., Aldebaran will disappear behind the moon at 6:43 p.m., and reappear at 7:55. So let me center on the moon so that it's always in the center of what we're looking at. And let me rewind time. Oh, sorry, that was fast forwarding. Okay. So during the daytime is when this is going to start. And it looks like it's not quite happening there. It's kind of hard to see that. So as I fast forward time, at least in the simulation, it's already hidden. Up, and there it reappears at about 7:55 p.m. So what's really going to happen is, let me rewind this to 6:43 p.m. Oh, I don't know what that happened. 6:43 p.m. So what's going to happen is Antares is going to be like right about here, okay? And, sorry about that, guys. What's going to happen is that star's there, and the moon is actually moving across, and then at 7:55, Antares pops back behind it. You'll need a telescope because it's still in the dusk time, still during the daytime that this happens. So get out your telescope or binoculars to see this. Okay, but anyway, let's move on. That's April 10th. And the 11th, it's a little bit thicker and higher in the sky. And then on the 12th, thicker and higher. 13th, thicker and higher. And that's the first quarter moon, visible, until about midnight. And then, again, not much really happens, except if you look at the moon from day to day, April 14th, April 15th, April 16th, it's getting closer and closer to Jupiter, until on the 17th, Jupiter and the moon are actually fairly close together. Okay, they're only about 3 degrees apart in the southeast, and they're there after sunset, and they'll be moving across the sky, and they'll be in the west around 4:30 in the morning. And what you've also noticed about the moon is that it's getting thicker and thicker and thicker. Okay. And on the 22nd is the full moon visible all night. Now the problem is with that is that there is a Lyrid meteor shower on the 22nd. Why is that a problem? Because the moon is a big bright light in the sky, and that drowns out some of the other meteors that are nearby, or that might happen that are kind of faint. And because of that, you don't get as much of a good meteor shower. And Lyrids are only about 10 to 20 meters per hour anyway, so even though it's a meteor shower, I'm going to tell you, don't bother going out unless you have some free time to stare at the sky anyway. So good luck if you go out, but I don't think I'm going out. Hopefully it's warm and I can go out. Anyway, let me move on from there. Keep looking at the moon, and you notice that It's getting closer and closer. April 24th, April 25th. It's getting closer and closer to Mars and Saturn, like I had talked about before. Okay? So check that out on the night of the 24th into the morning of the 25th. And then lastly, I'm just going to go to the early morning. It's April 25th, 26th, 27th. You notice the moon is getting thinner and less bright. And then April 29th is the last quarter moon, and it's visible from midnight and into the morning. And that's about it. That's going on for the month. Not too much, but it might be neat to see that occultation if you can. So let me just talk real quick about some constellations. Let me go to an average night, April 15th. And let me go to sunset, zoom out a little bit, and here we go. Let's go to like 9 p.m. on an average night. If you look off to the southwest, you'll see Orion out there again. Okay, last chance really to catch him. The big bow tie in the sky, look at the knot, look at Orion's belt right there, and move to the right. Follow those 3 stars to the right, you'll find Taurus the bull. And follow a little bit further and you'll find Pleiades, the little star cluster there. And if you follow Orion's stars to the left, his belt stars to the left, you find the brightest star in the sky, Sirius, which is in Canis Major. A couple things that you might want to look at too. If you see Orion over here, look up and to the left, and you'll find the constellation Cancer, which has basically 5 dimmer stars that sort of make up the shape, but the beehive cluster is in it, just a nice cluster of stars, whereas elsewhere you don't really see clusters of stars. But if you look at the beehive cluster, you certainly do see a cluster of stars. Leo the Lion's looking pretty good out there as well. Yeah, and I think actually that's where I'm going to stop for today. You've got some good stuff to look at. I hope you have a very, very good April, and I wish you very clear, dark skies.